The whole thing defies logic, and the fact that this keeps on getting churned out, frankly, has a lot to do with political motivations. We've had folks who have challenged Hillary Clinton's integrity, Susan Rice's integrity, Mike Mullen and Tom Pickering's integrity. It's a given that mine gets challenged by these same folks. They've used it for fundraising. And frankly, if anybody out there wants to actually focus on how we make sure something like this does not happen again, I am happy to get their advice and information and counsel.
Back now to our top story. And President Obama, a little more than an hour ago, defensively pushing back against new questions about the terror attack that killed 4 Americans in Benghazi, Libya last September. Joining me now, John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and a Fox News contributor. And what did you make of the president's comments earlier today?
Well, I think he's still trying to deny that we really did have a problem there. The notion that somehow or another that he was being direct and honest with the American people in the aftermath of the attack just doesn't stand up to scrutiny. Nor does his policy beforehand stand up to scrutiny of what was going on in Libya, what the threats were, what the danger our diplomats were in, all of which goes precisely to the point of why the investigation is necessary, because we haven't had an adequate explanation about what happened before, during, or after the attack yet.
He doesn't seem to get why we don't get it. He doesn't seem to understand why we, the American people, in part, not everyone, but still have questions about, in particular, the story this administration told us in the days after this attack, when they sent, the person who wound up in your old role, Susan Rice, out on the Sunday talk shows to tell us that this was about a spontaneous protest, period, and downplayed any notion of terror, including when the leader of Libya came on and said, I'm telling you, this was a terrorist attack. And now today, in an extraordinary moment, President Obama went out there and said, he talked about sending Matt Olson, the head of the Counterterrorism Center, out there. And Matt explained everything. Listen to President Obama here.
And keep in mind that 2 to 3 days after Susan Rice appeared on the Sunday shows, using these talking points, which have been the source of all this controversy, I sent up the head of our National Counterterrorism Center, Matt Olson, up to Capitol Hill and specifically said it was an act of terrorism and that extremist elements inside of Libya had been involved in it. So if this was some effort on our part to try to downplay what had happened or tamp it down, that would be a pretty odd thing.
What the president just said about Matt Olson is flatly untrue. Number one, he didn't send him to the Hill. He was called to the Hill. Number two, he referred to it as an act of terrorism, not in his prepared testimony, but in response to a question. And I remember it quite well. I'm sure others do, too. It was a firestorm on Capitol Hill because finally someone in the administration had said straight out this was an act of terrorism. So the president is either being a little economical with the truth today, or he still doesn't understand what the nature of the problem is.
And then our own Catherine Herridge reported after that, because she covers this beat, that he got his hands slapped for going that far, that he got his hands slapped for that this wasn't a congratulatory effort. They were upset that he went that far, but now the president wants us to believe it was something it was all orchestrated by him. He was sent there to say, he must have forgotten to say it in his primary remarks, but thankfully one of the congressmen reminded him.
Well, the president must have forgotten what was in his own speech to the United Nations General Assembly a few days after Matt Olson went to the Hill, where, again, before the entire world at the UN, the president blamed it on the Mohammed video. So this definitely is a creative rewriting of history.
And then he went on The View, and they specifically said, was this an act of terror? And he didn't want to go that far. And so it's a little jarring to hear him express befuddlement and confusion at why the rest of us still have questions when we've been told so many different stories. And Carney on Friday and now President Obama today just continue to look at us like, do you refuse to get it? Is that your problem? I mean, even now we're seeing the mainstream media, in the wake of the John Carl report on Friday, which echoed Steve Hayes' reporting a week earlier, start to say, you know what? there really might be something here, and we really need investigations. Where do we go from here, Ambassador?
Well, I think the congressional investigations have to continue, whether it's through the form of a select committee in the House of Representatives.
And what does that mean, select committee?
Well, it would bring together members from a lot of different House committees that have some claim to oversight: intelligence, foreign affairs, armed services. I think Speaker Boehner either needs to pick a select committee like right now, or he ought to decide and give somebody the lead, whether it's Darrell Issa or somebody else. We need to consolidate this. But I would say this is going to take a long time to investigate. There are a lot of documents to review here, a lot of emails, a lot of people to interview. For those who said after the last hearing, which was quite dramatic, I thought, but there's no smoking gun. Don't wait around for the smoking gun. To mix metaphors, this is 3 yards in a cloud of dust. We need a lot of spade work here, a lot of investigation, and I think that is the only chance to get the whole story.
Why don't we see the presidential daily briefs? Why don't we see the emails that got leaked to Steve Hayes and John Carl? Why can't we all see them so that we can all have a full vetting and discussion? I want to ask you about these two guys who headed up the ARB, the Accountability Review Board. Hillary Clinton selected them and said, go ahead and investigate us and me. And now it's become very clear that they did not interview her. And when asked, why didn't you interview her, Ambassador Pickering said, because, in fact, we knew where the responsibility rested. In other words, not with her.
Yeah, this is like the Red Queen, you know, verdict first, trial after. In this case, they didn't bother with the trial. They had already made up their minds. I do think that the ARB issue and the incompleteness of its report is a sideshow. I think, as my old boss Jim Baker used to say, keep your eyes on the prize. And the prize is not what people told the ARB or what questions they asked or didn't ask. They had a limited statutory mandate. I think they felt constrained within their own limits. Who really cares what they said? They don't know anything more about Benghazi than what people told them. The congressional committee should talk to the people who had actual knowledge, as they did with the 3 witnesses 10 days ago. That's where the story is.
But we saw Hillary Clinton. She didn't talk to the head of the ARB, but she did talk to Congress. She went and gave testimony before Congress, and it was a total waste of time. All we heard was congressional speeches. These lawmakers, really, let's face it, they were pathetic. They didn't ask pointed questions. She just got to give up there and give her soliloquy. Then they gave their soliloquies. There was very little back and forth. Would it be a different story if by chance they managed to subpoena her and get her to give additional testimony this time?
Well, you know, she's a private citizen now. I think they should do with her what they did with Gregory Hicks and the other witnesses, in effect, take her deposition. Off camera, no grandstanding, just boring lawyers asking questions and insisting they get answers. And then when they've got her story, then let her go out and testify again. I mean,
there's so many follow-up questions in the wake of these allegations. And we are told, although we will see, that there are other whistleblowers who want to come forward, in particular in the CIA. And they don't.
They're still scared. They want to see how these 3 witnesses are treated. I think Secretary of State Kerry should say, look, we have nothing to hide here. I am personally guaranteeing these 3 individuals that there will be no retaliation, that their careers will go on unimpeded. I think he ought to say it on television with the 3 of them next to him. I think it would be an important signal to career officials in state and other agencies that they are encouraged to come forward with the truth. That's what the American people need.
Here's the 2 big messages we've had from Secretary Kerry on this issue recently. Number 1, I didn't hear anything new last week with the whistleblower testimony, and I'm not going to spend the next year coming up here on Capitol Hill and talking about Benghazi. I mean,
yeah, this dead cat is not yet on his doorstep, but if he persists, it will be.
All right, just like Jay Carney. Benghazi was a long time ago. Right. That wasn't the message we heard from the White House on Friday when the mainstream media finally jumped on board. Ambassador, good to see you.
Thank you.